Hi, this is Matthew Asbell, and this is Intangify. On Intangify, we discuss the intangible aspects of business. And today, I'm honored to have Terri Morrison as our guest. Terri is the well known author of Kiss, Bow, and Shake Hands and several other books, and a master of cultural competency, an issue that we face in our practice, but businesses face in their practices all the time. Terri, welcome.
Thank you, Matt. It's a pleasure to be here.
I'm so glad you could be here as well. Um, so Terry, I've known about you for years. You've been this sort of mysterious author that I heard of who wrote this book that everybody talks about. It's my pleasure to actually get to talk with you and really drill down into the issues that you have been writing about and speaking about for so long.
Well, it's amazing that the book has been so popular. We just passed the 500,000 mark for the Big Red Book, and so Simon and Schuster re-released it with new front matter and a new forward, and it's just got, as they say in publishing, it's got legs.
It should definitely be, well over the million mark, because of its importance, and at least from my to my knowledge, it is the go-to book about these issues of dealing with international cultures and the practices that people have in their businesses and also in my practice in law. So I look forward to hearing, that you've broken the million mark.
Thank you, thank you. Well, it was funny because when I started, it was for business travelers, and, the industries that picked it up are so varied, and then we ended up with this latest one from the American Bar Association, which I think is relevant for your patrons and members, and, uh, that's sort of the gap between industries that's interesting. There are universal behaviors that cross all these environments because culturally, if we're in the US, we're going to negotiate differently and we're going to think about time differently and even gift giving than you would if you were from China or Argentina. So that's the key to being prepared, I think, internationally, getting a little research done, being a little more diplomatic, and then you have more success.
Yeah, it's a topic that's very important to me in my practice. Dealing with lawyers from all over the world as well as people within companies from all over the world. Um, and also counseling US companies as they try to go abroad and work on their efforts abroad. It's very important for them to understand really different perceptions and expectations that colleagues have when they come from different cultures. One of those topics I know is something you address in your book and in your online platform, um, which which is about the concept of time. Because we are in the US a very time focused culture. Interestingly, my wife is from South America, from Brazil. I would say that in her culture it tends to be uh, quite different perception of time, but she has adopted the American way, and she gets mad at me when I am a minute late. Talk to us about the differences in perception of time from different cultures.
I'm delighted to because, yes, we're monochronic, as they say, which means we're very linear. We parse time out, and particularly with attorneys in 15-minute increments. You bill for those moments of your life, and you are hyper aware of being either on time or early. And there are cultures like us. There's Germany, which is at the far end of the spectrum for being most aware of be on time, be early. And then also the Japanese, who are in many ways vastly different from us, but their concept of time is also 10 minutes early because it's incredibly rude to keep someone waiting or not being prepared, and you don't want to disturb the tranquility there. So you can be monochronic and also have other cultural aspects of negotiating and so forth. But your wife came from a culture that's exceedingly polychronic. So to them, the priority is the individual in front of me, the person that I'm physically around, um, and the aspect of spending time, which is more valuable to them with that priority, whether it's my child or my coworker or my doctor, whomever, I'm actually with them. And yes, I'm supposed to be somewhere in 5 minutes and I will be there, but being 5 minutes, 10, 15, 20 minutes late, it's okay, which develops into an issue when somebody from the US or Norway or Sweden goes to Argentina or Brazil, and they're sitting in the lobby waiting for their client to arrive, and 20 minutes later, the client rolls in, and there's no apology because they didn't do anything wrong. So the issue is you have to know how to adapt and plan for those scenarios before you ever get on a plane. So you bring work with you and you enjoy the day and you chat with the receptionists. And then when they come, you don't take any umbrage. You just adapt and then you are ready for the meeting and they're delighted to see you. And then the best thing is if you have a good meeting in Brazil, they invite you to lunch. And then "Oh, okay, this was a great meeting, great new client." The problem is that if you booked other issues because you thought you'd make 7 appointments a day, now you skip lunch with a potential client, and then they'll never meet with you again because you insulted them. So there's all these weird permutations in the web that you have to think about prior to setting up your agendas.
The thing that always throws me in relation to this is I get that in a particular culture, they might have a particular perception, but I have to also worry about making assumptions about those people. I'm meeting someone from this country, and I know that people from this country have this particular expectation or view when it comes to timing. But I worry because if I'm dealing with people who are accustomed to working internationally, I'm making a wrong assumption about them. How do you advise people? I mean, it's one thing to sort of make a generalization, say this culture, this is how they view things, but hey, I'm meeting this person. What should I do? How should I know whether they honor time from their perspective or from mine, or a different or different way altogether?
Well, if you're the supplicant, so to speak, we're going to their country, then we absolutely are on time. And whether or not they are there at the moment, the appointment was scheduled is not actually relevant. Like people in the Mid East have a phrase that you are slaves to the clock in Arabic. So they know that we're going to be extremely, concerned about being somewhere promptly. They're not insulted or, upset if we're there on time. The problem is if we're not on time, we're the supplicant again. So they have expectations of us that are important. If they're coming to our country, yes, they're gonna have to adapt, maybe be a little more prompt to their appointments, but when I'm working with anyone from an international venue, I wouldn't call it an assumption, I would call it being prepared. Because, yeah, you're gonna have a Japanese executives who is nothing like the other Japanese. They're gonna gesticulate wildly, and they're gonna be loud, and they're gonna do strange behaviors for Japan, but they're an individual. And so, yes, you're right. You can't predict what any individual is going to do, but the guideline is more to give you a sensibility for the traditions that have taken 1,000 years to develop and their religious sensibilities and maybe their foods that they don't eat. They have taboos against, pork or beef or whatever it may be. Then you don't insult anybody by just not doing your research.
Yeah, that makes sense. I still want to push back a little bit because um, it makes it really tough to plan. I mean, if I'm planning a trip, let's go. We can stick with Brazil, right, or somewhere else in South America. I'm planning a trip to go there. It's a business trip, and I'm making. Well, you don't want to use the word assumptions, but I have these. I'm going to their turf and should at least recognize the way many of them view things. But if I'm wrong, I have really reduced the amount of efficiency I could get out of my day, right? I mean, I could have planned these 6 meetings, but because I thought for a moment that there was a chance they might wanna take me to lunch, I didn't book something right afterwards, and now my trip is either I have to elongate my trip or my trip is not sufficient to enable me to do all the, meetings that I was hoping to do, right? That's me using my US perspective.
Yeah, yeah, you don't wanna waste your time wherever you are. But that the easiest thing I would do is to first, I try and make sure I contact the local consulate because they have foreign commercial service officers there, and those folks are very networked. So you do a little research and you find out what you can about the people in that industry, perhaps. And now you know a little bit more about what's coming up in, oil and gas or pharmaceuticals or whatever, because you've gotten a briefing from the consular service. So now you're a little smarter. And then I would also see, who do I know that knows this individual? This sounds kind of weird, but I'll look on LinkedIn. If I'm going to meet somebody, I think, do I know anybody at that firm and do I know anything this way? Because if it's a really important meeting, I also want to think about, is there a particular hobby that that person has? I'm preparing for a conversation, you see. So if they are a big fan of jazz or they love, westerns or whatever it might be, I can find things out. And yes, it sounds kind of odd, but the Chinese do it to us all the time. I mean, if you go to a conference and somebody happens to sit next to you and they turn to you and they say, "Oh, Matt, I hear you love baseball. I do too." And la 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 la. And this starts, that's not coincidence. They know because they've researched you and they've assigned that person to sit next to you. And then after that whole conference is done, they all go and debrief, you know? So it's the funny thing is that we don't do any of that research normally. So we don't know a lot about the people that we're going to meet except for the fact that we're trying to sell something to them or get a contract or whatever it is. So I guess I would even reach out if I were going to Brazil, and your wife can correct me, but I have reached out to the admin of the executive that I'm going to meet with and found out their favorite restaurant, made a reservation. So that when the meeting goes well and they say, "Well, we should go to lunch," I say, "Oh, I happen to have a reservation over at ta-da." And boom, that just sort of shows that I'm thinking about you. I'm concerned for your welfare and I want to work with you. It's maybe a bit extreme for a US executive to do something like that, but I don't think it's unusual in other cultures.
It's interesting because I think, and I don't know if this is a generalization I can make across the board for US people, um, but I think, if we get the sense that somebody has researched us, like there's a discomfort.
I would never do that in Germany because privacy is an extremely important aspect of business and personal life in Germany. You're not allowed to call people after work hours. It's sort of a law now or so. And yet in Latin America, it's seen as, "Oh, well, that was kind of gracious. She did something special for me, or she brought the right gift, or she did something to connect me with another environment where I'll get business," or, millions of things. Write an article about me. Um, there's yes, we're very sensitive, and also because of data breaches, we don't like people searching on us, but, and stalkers and all of this has changed. But I think it's a fine line, but I think the point is you wanna do your research, just like you would on a court case, You would find out everything you could during discovery or whatever it's called.
So I think you mentioned here gift giving, and I think I want to transition to go to that because when we go to such and such a country to go to a conference or to go meet with potential clients or existing clients, um, I think there's a similar aspect from a US perspective of unpreparedness in that, if I go, like, for instance, I just came back from a trip, a little while ago, uh, to the United Kingdom for an international conference. And at that conference, I met a colleague from China, gave me this beautiful giant red box, which I had to figure out how to carry home. But this beautiful giant red box, I'll even show you here. This is not the red box, but but he brought me this beautiful gold cup, or you can call it a pencil case. It's very nice. This is not branded with his firm. It's not self promotion in any way. It was just a gift. But
Very
there was
lovely.
this sense of, like, right in that moment as I received this very gracious gift
Thank
of,
you.
yeah, I mean, thank you, but gee, I didn't
You
bring
didn't have
anything
any
for you.
you didn't
And
even give
gee,
him a
huh?
book? Nothing, huh?
Nothing, right? And why is that, right? Because we don't go, at least often don't go. I mean, I can imagine how many of these things did my friend from China bring with him. How heavy was his luggage? Did he only pick out, his 5 favorite people, and I happen to be one of them? But whatever it was, like, he came bearing gifts, and it's not the first time that this particular person has come bearing a gift. And you'd think I would have learned by now that maybe I should have brought something for him, but I didn't. Should I have? Or does he recognize that, "Oh, it's America, they never bring gifts, and I don't need any gifts." Like, what's the perception from these cultures that give gifts as to what they should be receiving?
He may have shipped a big box of the gifts that he had selected personally, and I would ask him about, maybe you can email him, "This is so extraordinary. Are the mountains of a certain range in China, or what just, what does it say on the," and the fact that it's gold and it's a, auspicious color and so forth. But yes, I would say that it's pretty common. For example, I work with the World Affairs Council of Philadelphia here, and they do a lot of trips, and gifts are a part of that because you're an emissary from Philadelphia or wherever you're from New York, and so you pick something that's easy to pack, indicative from where you are, and acts as an invitation to come visit. So it could be something, but you have to know the things that you don't give. Like you don't give the Liberty Bell to people in Asia because there's a crack in the bell, and that's not a really auspicious because they don't know the history of it. They're looking at a bell with a crack in it, and that's what you have to think, what's the best option here? But it's really easy to just think, who's a local artist that's very well known in New York, maybe does silk screen scarves or ties or something you can pack, or a book about New York City, or, a sports memo, or, right now we've got FIFA coming over. How much sports memorabilia is going to be exchanged between all the teams? Those kind of things, like people from here in Philly, they take Eagles gear, they take Phillies gear, they take the Flyers gear. They have all kinds of golf gifties from, we just had the PGA. And that's, it has an impact because you're not trying to make it even because you don't know what you're going to receive from them. So it's very hard to make them equivalent, but you're showing them that I hope you come visit. I welcome you here, and I heard you like golf, so here's a golf towel from Aronimick where they had the PGA, some swag or something for their children. It is true that we have an aversion to gift giving, particularly men, because, if you're retiring, you get a watch. Whoo, that's appropriate, right? But we don't I would never go to a client and say, I'll bring you a book and I'll sign it, but that's different. That's because I wrote it. But oh, that's not true. I have given books to clients that I know are fans of certain authors, and they have a new book out. So I will get, I just a predilection of mine. I do love books of poetry to give away, books of any kind. And that can be very good in France, for example. You get a sophisticated author and it's a well-respected, you don't give them a Harlequin romance. You give them something with gravitas because they're well read, and you're giving them something, that will challenge them or engage them. But yes, it's a problem here because it's not our custom to exchange gifts unless it's a holiday or you're retiring, weddings, something like that. But at some level, anywhere in Asia, yes, I would bring anything that would be easily sent, easily accepted. I've given cutting boards made from local trees. I've given, just flat cutting boards that are from see, that's another thing. In many cultures, you can't own property like we do in China. So if you have a historic tree in an environment and it's dies and you cut it down, that's treasured wood. So there I could go on about gifts all day, I'm sorry, but yeah, there's all sorts of interesting things that certain cultures will appreciate, and they don't even use the cutting board, they display it, because it's such an important thing. Because they could never have a tree like that.
Yeah. So I had so many things to say in response to that. I mean, one is because U.S. people are not in a culture of gift giving generally in the context of business and meetings and things of this nature. I think that we're also quite bad at receiving the gifts. So we also don't know how to receive the gifts. So I wanted to make that point, but I also wanted to point out that I can think of a couple instances where I have received a gift and it impacted me, and I know it impacted me. I remember the gift, so I have more show and tell. This was a set of chopsticks that a Korean attorney gave to me when I met her at a conference in California at one point. I could be wrong, but I believe that the writing there actually has my name on it. And it's funny because I saw her again this last meeting, and I said, I still have those beautiful chopsticks that you gave me, which, are up on my shelf. And she's like, "No, no, you should be using them." But I'm like, I can't bring myself. It was such a nice gift that I felt that like I needed to put it up on my shelf and look at it.
That's a traditional gift. I have been gifted chopsticks too and it's neat. I just want to point out that Korean chopsticks are different from Japanese chopsticks because the angles versus a cylindrical and wood versus a metal and so forth. So that is indicative of their specific culture. And it's beautiful, just gorgeous. Yeah. You know what you could do? You could go out to dinner with your family, bring the chopsticks, have a nice meal, and have a photo of you eating with the chopsticks, post that on media and tag her, and then "Thank you so much," and write it in Hangul, Korean.
There was another one though that I also wanted to point out. I don't have it in front of me, but I went to a local domestic conference in DC, and I met this attorney who's a solo practice in New Orleans, and randomly, well, what I perceived as randomly, I received a package from her with all of these New Orleans food items that I happen to know are fantastic. Certain spices that Cajun seasonings, and it was like a whole box of stuff. And I'm like, wow. And I'm like, why did she do this? Like she didn't need to do this. And in a sense, in a sense, that was so unusual that it made a really distinct impression, as opposed to like some of my Asian colleagues who really every time I see them, they have a gift for me, even though I don't have anything for them. But they put such thought into it, and they're very nice, and it's common. Someone from the US that takes the step of thinking about and sending something to you again from their hometown, and like you said, sort of drawing upon their culture and where they're from, really was very meaningful. And I think so when I think of the person who gave me the chopsticks, first of all, she's the first person I think of whenever I think of anyone in Korea. But when I think of this attorney in New Orleans, I think so fondly of her all the time. And it's not really because she sent me a gift in the sense, like, wow, I got these great chips, and it was something I really wanted or needed. It was this person thought of me and shared something with me, and that created this warmth that otherwise I don't think would have been there.
It's interesting that they're both food related as well. That's a brilliant kind of gift, and I love New Orleans. It's one of my most favorite places in the world, and I'm all about the food as well, so that is a brilliant gift. But it's also the kind of gift that you could go to Canada and they love good food and they love cooking and the French, and so you have the French in New Orleans. And if you were hosting people and you happen to be a gourmet and you have a great kitchen, the best thing you can do is have them to your house, feed them with something that you're really good at cooking, and invite them in and have the wine and all of these things which enhance the relationship. Like, it just ratchets up to a new level, like what you were just describing your feelings for the person in Nolans. That is how you build relationships. You break bread together, your glucose level goes up. If there's wine, that works too. But those aspects all again are part of building relationships. And that's what I think is the difference that we're really talking about here is about at least 70% of the world works on relationships, and we work on transactions. So we're transaction based, which means we don't think about the other person as a friend. We don't care as much about the network. We don't care about them individually. So I would think, oh, they love the Phillies. I'll get a Phillies cap when I go over. Um, and we're in the minority in the world. So if you're even in the US, if you're working with Latinos or people who are from a different cultural heritage, they're not going to behave always the same way. They're going to invite you over for a meal. It's all day, and all the friends come and go and come and you could meet, I mean, your wife with Brazil, you have people in and out of your house all the time. And it could be, 7 in the morning and you best have your clothes on because they're coming in. So it's a different kind of concept which starts when you're a child. And so if we are brought up to, have to have an invitation extended for you to come to my house, and to have an event for me to give you a gift and to eat food out of a machine instead of sitting down in, the cafeteria when you're a little kid and them having prepared fresh food for you in Japan every single day. They have chefs in elementary schools. The whole concept of what is your normal gestalt is different. So it's a burden for us to buy gifts. I gotta think about a gift for this guy, or I don't know what to bring. But if you just have somebody who can help you with that and rely on that, I mean, you could call up Bloomingdale's or anybody and say, I need your gift giving department. I'm going to China. And they would help you. So it's not as onerous as it might sound as at first, and it will differentiate you from all the attorneys who do no research and don't bring a gift.
So let me segue a second, as I think about this, because I know that you have multiple books, including the original Kiss Battle Shake Hands, but as well as one geared towards lawyers, and some others. Um, I also know you have this digital platform, and I'd like to ask you to maybe talk a little bit about that. But the question I have as it relates to this, and maybe this will frame it for you, it's one thing to read a generalized book that says, "Hey, gee, you should take these things into account. Here's the globe, and here's all these interesting things that you probably wouldn't realize." That helps with a general outlook, as to things you should be aware of in life and all over the world. But when you're going to meet someone in a particular country, you're traveling to a particular place, um, do you have, books or programs on your digital platform that would help address a specific place that someone is going? And as a corollary to that, um, do you consult on these topics? So when a person like me is going to Nigeria, um, and I don't know much about the customs, yes, I can get a book, etc. But is there a way that I can come to you as a resource for what gift do you recommend I get them, or something of that nature?
Yes, well, to start with the digital concept, I always kept the electronic rights to my books because I came from tech sort of many years ago, and I love tech. And before there were books, it was a digital product. So that I think is of benefit. You could call it ebooks now or audiobooks as well. We have an audiobook now. Those kind of modalities are important to offer to everybody who uses, I prefer a real book, but a lot of people don't have time for that. And they're on the plane and they need to just flip to the section on Nigeria or France or whatever. So yes, that's, I think, of value also in educational environments. It's pretty common for corporations to use our digital product because they have people who are, relocating or they're selling to a new environment. But higher ed, particularly in the law, doesn't seem to concentrate as much on international business and international law. It's only really been since 9/11 that you saw even Harvard start an international law division. So it's really kind of a different view. And I think being able to access it online is very helpful. And then the second part, yes, I do help with consulting, but it's more like I like to do presentations that cover a lot of topics because until you get a grasp of here's all the differences between from your initial greeting and why they don't have eye contact with you or how much is appropriate to you're in there and you're marketing, oh, you're not allowed to market like this in Germany. You're not allowed to compare products, or you're trying to sell to people in the Mideast, and these are the taboos you can't do. All the way through negotiating the sale to closing, and then the gestures, the meals, and the gifts are the last thing. So I love to do presentations, and I do a lot of those in corporations and government, and some in higher ed. But after that, then you get the people who have the specific questions. This is our problem right now. Here's a case study that we want you to, you know, sort of consult on. And I'll enjoy doing that because the questions make more sense then, because they're aware of the gap between their sensibilities and the clients. But if you just don't know, you don't know what you don't know, and it would take so long, So give me an hour to start it off with a group of people and then do the subsequent consulting that after. That makes more sense in many venues. Because
Okay,
also
that
you get a neat group of people in there and they'll start doing what you're doing. Well, what if this happens? And, so that's of help.
okay. So, so how does it work if someone wants access to your digital platform? Are you charging like a monthly fee or something like a subscription?
For higher ed, it's lower. The students can go in and for like, I think it's under $50. And for someone else, it would be maybe 65 for the annual fee. But if you look at the larger enterprise-wide licenses, we do those, and that means if you're having 500 people access, it's this, and then it's tiered pricing, and again, it's annually.
And how frequently are you adding to what's on the digital platform?
I am adding an interesting amount because of what we're doing now. I'm recording and I'm putting in videos. So I guess, overall, maybe once a month we add something in. Either it's an article or content, or I update information for uh, leaders in the country, or political scenarios. A lot of the data in there is actually kind of static because if you have certain behaviors, particularly the cultural orientation, which is your cognitive styles, it's going to be this way because it's been that way for hundreds of years. That's probably not going to change next month. Um, so there's probably about 70%, 80% that's pretty, static. And then the rest that's dynamic is because, oh, I just did a podcast with you and it made me think about doing a matrix of different approaches to the US market or to legal systems between civil law and common law and Sharia law and rabbinical law and things like that.
Okay. So you're essentially adding to it every month with things that inspire you or questions that come up to you in your in as a result of your presentations or other interactions. It sounds like.
Right, right. Yeah. And hopefully I'd like to do uh I think there's value in interviewing people. I know that happens all the time, and I have not incorporated many interviews into my work, but I've done some, and I think if you take the premise of, okay, let's talk about time or negotiating or communication styles. These folks are really blunt. These people are very subtle and talk about nuances in their conversations. Let's take somebody who does that and then the other style and have them talk to each. I can think of lots of vignettes, be fun.
Yeah, that's the kinds of stuff that I'm an adjunct professor at a law school. So one of the things that I do is I have these types of vignettes and hypotheticals where I have them work out differences. We try to bring in issues of cultural difference and expectation. They're not always about where people are from, their country or their race or their religion. Sometimes it's really just about an individual and their perception. Right. So I will give, as an example, I'll give students like, you're going to act as the client here, as the potential client who has this problem, but you are very short on time and you're very anxious and you just want an answer and you don't want and you're very concerned about the overarching costs and then make them the one playing the lawyer in that context then raise or address those types of issues and expectations that the potential client or existing client has so that they've thought about that because in the truth, right, it may be that I'm dealing with a colleague from Australia or a colleague from Japan or Brazil or Argentina or anywhere else, and they may bring with them their cultural identity or other aspects to the negotiations, the discussions that we're having, to their expectations. But they also may bring their own individual expectations that really don't arise from necessarily from the culture. And we, as people who are interacting with them, as lawyers doing business with them, as business people doing business with them, need to adjust to conform. And I guess I'll raise something else related to that because this is something that I do and I struggle with, but I try to do. Right, I'm a lawyer in New York. A lawyer in New York, there's a perception about us, right? When someone is writing an email to the lawyer they don't know in New York to help them with X problem, there's there's an automatic distrust. There's an automatic discomfort. What is this person going to ask of me? Are they going to gouge me? Do they care about me? Right? Are they transactional, as you put it? Right? Because I'm approaching them with a transaction. Um, and so there are elements of how do you engender the trust? Because this is really in the end, when it's business, it is about trust and trusting relationships. How do you engender trust when the first perception of you is as a stranger who doesn't care about?
Yeah.
I'd love to hear what your thoughts are. I have my own.
Well, if you take it from an individual, I would ask them their goals, yeah, and if they're concerned about, "This is gonna gouge me, I don't wanna have to pay by the, nickel and dime," maybe they don't come from a culture that bills people that way. As you mentioned to me previously, that there's lots of lawyers that do bill differently, and they don't realize even that you're gonna bill them by the phone call, by the hour, and so forth. So you have to have, here's the way that we normally proceed through our relationships. And they can have that before they ever walk in the door, or it could be on your website, so they know what to expect. And set that aside. I'm personally interested in your goals, because whether or not we're transactional, that person, whether they're from, England or Saudi Arabia, they're going to have their own individual priorities. So you have to give them the time to voice that. So that relationship, as you say, you have to build the trust. Trust is built here on credibility, price, the transaction has got to be clean, and it's really almost a one and done. I don't need to be your best friend to do business with you. I don't care if I like you. I'll buy that car from you because it's the car I want. Whereas in Mexico, you would never walk into a car dealership unless you knew somebody in the dealership, you know, and you don't get a loan out. The whole family gets the money together to buy the car. So everything's different. So you have to give them a chance to tell you, I think, what will make them comfortable. And that's always my goal is, what can I do to make sure that I over deliver whatever it is that you're paying me for? And there's sincere lawyers. There's honest lawyers. There's people with good reputation. That's the thing. If they're from an environment that really wants to do a relationship scenario, then they might know you already. Somebody referred you to them. That's the way that you would do business in Japan. You would never cold call somebody in Japan. You would have a letter of introduction almost still with some of the generations. So yeah, there's a lot of nuances in anybody that you meet. You could be working like I did at the polls on Tuesday for the primaries, and everybody came in was an individual, hundreds of them, and I was delighted to see all of them. I was tired, but I was happy.
Well, I think that there's an element of inviting people to share their expectations that we forget to do. I try to purposely do it in my communications. Um, it involves kind of making assumptions or pointing out assumptions that you might be making, and being comfortable with that, right? I don't know if this is something that concerns you or doesn't, but some of my clients have this concern, and so there's an element of, you know, I'd love for you to share with me what your concerns are, and feel free that you're welcome to come to me with that. And I will try to adjust to once I understand what your expectations are. We don't do that enough, really, the invitation. And because we don't invite it, we don't necessarily know. If we just assume we could be wrong, but if we invite it, we are giving them the opportunity to be different from what we are perceiving, or what we assume about them based on where they're from, or whatever it is. So I think inviting them is important. I also think you know, being accessible to them is important. So as a side, interestingly, I came back from this conference. I had a call with a potential client who apparently doesn't speak English very well. They spoke Spanish, and I speak bad Spanish, but nonetheless, we held our meeting in Spanish. And we just I started out saying, "Look, my Spanish is not great," in Spanish, right? "My Spanish is not great, but I think this will at least give you comfort, and I will try. I just think that what we need to make sure we do is repeat back to each other what we understand, so we know we are communicating to each other and aligning on what is being said." I had 2 of these calls, both in Spanish. I mean, it was great. It was really fun. Um, But, I know that I was making mistakes. I know that my Spanish, I was mixing with Portuguese. I couldn't think of words. I had to say, do you know what the word is to do X? Um, we had to try a couple times. It took longer, but the point was, and to be accessible. So the point was, hey, here's my number on WhatsApp or WeChat or whatever they use. Like, we still will communicate via email. We'll still have the Zoom, whatever, but you have a way to reach out. So I'm not the stranger in New York that doesn't care about you. I'm someone who you can ping and check in with. I think it worked very well, and I think it is working very well, but it takes a lot of extra effort. And for people like us who are billing by time and who are focused on time in the way you described, monochronic, it takes an extra step to breathe and say, I'm not going to do this my normal way. I know this is going to take longer. Um, I I know I'm not going to charge for this. Um, but in the investment in I'm trying to develop this relationship. So I will invest this extra time, even though I normally charge, right? To, because I want you to feel comfortable. I want you to, and I want to know what matters to you so that I can adjust accordingly.
That's extraordinary. That's just brilliant, and I'm so happy that you did that, and, um yo hablo español poquito también, but, it would be really cognitively draining to have a phone call, so I admire you for doing that, to build a relationship, and they're going to trust you far more. But the only thing I will say here is that, Matt, you can never step away from that client now. If you are out of the country or here or there, and they call your office, they're gonna want Matt. They're not gonna want somebody else because you are the company now to them. And maybe in your scenario, it's not as big an issue, but if you're like a in a massive company and say you're just a cog in a wheel, you work it XYZ, you're still that company to that person from Mexico or Chile or wherever they were. They think you can change, policy for them. You can spend time for them as a representative of that company. So nobody else will do now, which is totally different from us. Like we could work with somebody from Denmark this week, and then I'm replaced, and they'll work with somebody else in the company next week because it's Denmark or it's Germany or Sweden or Switzerland. They're all transactional. But again, you're doing it in an incredibly sensitive and beautiful way for that individual to benefit them. And you also had a good time. I would have had a great time too, but I would have been macerating every class. Yeah, exactly.
I have a colleague in Australia, and I was actually talking with her about this, and one thing that she did early on in our relationship with each other, we exchanged some work with each other. Um, but early on, we had a meeting where she introduced me to two of her colleagues who work, underneath her, like as a junior attorney or as a paralegal. But she made sure to introduce them and to then give them authority to communicate directly. So she gets copied on all their emails, but she presented them much in the way that we might get presented by someone external, um, and established that while I am the key to your relationship and I am here for you and I'm paying attention to everything that's going on with you and what we do for each other, I do have other people who are doing some of the work or who will handle some of the work maybe less expensively, whatever it is. And I want you to know them, and to feel free to communicate with them, which I think is another thing that culturally we don't always do here. That created, uh, a warm feeling. Particularly, I have a warm feeling towards her and my relationship with her, but I also have comfort and a warm feeling towards those other people with whom I'm working because I do feel like I know them.
Yeah, there's a team there that will keep each other informed and you can trust the whole unit. It's not an individual's responsibility if she's on another call or whatever. Yeah, I think that's fabulous. I know that there's organizations that do that, because somebody is in sales or whatever, they're traveling all the time, but these are my backups. And I guess attorneys maybe not as common in your industry to do that, um, because, yeah, you're the key man, you're the key player, and you make those decisions, and that's gonna impact my life, particularly in a litigious scenario, so, yeah, I can get that, but it's nice that they did that, yeah, I think it's great, and it's more efficient, right? Financially and time-wise, it's pretty appropriate. So who's on your team?
Putting it out there, but I mean, that's it, like, it is the putting it out there and sharing, transparently, right, and giving and inviting and giving access that I think ultimately, um, helps with the relationship building that we're trying to do here, as much as it is, understanding the culture of the people, whom you're meeting with, and what their expectations are likely to be or might be, and then being shifted by those things.
Something just occurred to me about that. She's from Australia, you said, and that's a more egalitarian, not a hierarchical environment. So, yes, that makes real good sense in that scenario, but if you're in China or India, where you have an extremely formal hierarchy, um, the here's an example. You could be doing this kind of work with somebody and you could ask them for a decision and they will demur because actually all this time they're not the one in charge. They're going to turn around and send all this data up to the person who actually makes the decisions, and then it has to funnel back down, and then they come back and tell you that verdict. Um, but you can have very flat organizations in um, all across Northern Europe, Sweden, Finland, Norway, Australia. Very, very interesting how flat their cultures can be. As a matter of fact, in the Netherlands, if you went in there with your BMW and your fancy jewels and all your, you're going to be looked at like, oh, pretty ostentatious. I don't see why he's got all that bling on. I guess he's in business to amass personal wealth and has the poor taste to show it. Uh, it's a thing, so you don't show off in certain cultures. Chile's the same way. Um, so there's all these variables that come across as, "Oh, isn't that nice that they had the group there?" Or they communicate so sensitively, or they're on time, or they're minute li all of them weave together in these studies of how we're rich because we're so different, you know? Rather than everybody being exactly the same, which would be horrendous.
Well, whether luckily or unluckily on my part, I don't have those things to be able to be ostentatious enough. But it's good to know. But I
You
do
don't
want to.
roll up in your yacht,
Yeah,
okay.
no, 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 no yachts. At least not yet. Working on it. Um, but exceptionally to your comment, because you did bring up India, like I actually have an Indian colleague who's high up in his particular firm, and he sent a very junior person to attend a conference that nobody else from his firm went to, um, and wrote to me and said, "I'm sending this person to this conference, and he doesn't know anybody and hasn't been to this conference before. Would you meet him?" And that also established a relationship directly with that more junior person that would not have otherwise established, would not have otherwise happened because, I have my go-to person and now I have a team of people at that firm as an example as well.
Mhm. Yeah, and that letter of introduction is all you need. That's all that person needed.
Can you do me the favor of meeting this person and kind of introducing him to some people when you're there, if it's convenient for you in a very nice, unimposing way?
Have you gone to India?
No, I need to.
It's a extraordinary environment, and I'm sure your friend who's the Indian attorney either he or his representatives will meet you at the airport. They will take you to your hotel. They will have an agenda for you the first evening, and you will not really be left alone for the duration of your trip. So it and it's amazing how hierarchical approaches differ because say they want to show you some historical sites or important religious environments and there's a big long line, they'll just walk to the front of the line with you. And you just kind of feel weird because everybody else is in line, but there's the hierarchy that the people will know that this VIP is coming and you just get to the front. So there's a lot of differences and you can get overwhelmed just by the food. I mean, but yeah, when you're ready to go, I'll send you some data.
Tell me, maybe as one last question, how did you get into this? How did you learn about all this stuff?
I started as a Spanish teacher right out of college. So that was so long ago, my Spanish is fatal. But I moved immediately to Texas and I went into I got my master's and then I went into tech. And I was the only person when I came back up here who was a corporate that spoke Spanish. And so I was in HR and I got involved in, all sorts of aspects of data centers and so forth. And then I went to Booz Allen for a contract. My boss had gone there, and I was looking at issues that was called information engineering, and I was thinking, these are not business problems, these are cultural issues. They were having issues in Mexico and different and so I wrote the first outline of a country profile and had it in Micro Basic, okay, back in the day before the internet. And I showed it to him and I said, "What do you think? Would you buy this?" And he said, "Yes." So I quit and I started my company um, with working with Cornell, University of Pennsylvania, Wharton School, and then my first two clients, I gave myself 6 months to I have enough money for 6 months of working on this, and I got AT&T and DuPont in 5 months, and they're the reason why I went and got a book contract because they didn't want it on a little network of computers, they wanted printouts, and I wasn't doing printouts, so I got a book called The Writer's Market, found a couple publishers, had a book contract in a couple of weeks, honestly, because I said, "Hey, I can give you a letter right here from AT&T that they will buy 5,000 copies." And it was, "Oh, okay." So that was the first kiss, bow, or shake hands.
Wow, that's incredible. That's an incredible story.
Isn't that crazy now to think back on there wasn't any internet, I had a little program, so really I had an ebook before I had a book.
That's really cool. That's really cool. I don't think we have time, but I would love to explore at some point in the future how AI is going to take a step involved in what you're offering digitally, and are people going to, maybe you can answer this quickly, like are people going to be able to interact with the digital platform using like an AI chatbot to try to find what it is they're looking for? I'm buying a gift for my friend when I go to Nigeria.
I think they're doing it now because if I look up, "Give me the negotiating styles between Japan and Germany," it's right out of there. And so it's that they've absorbed the book into the internet illegally, which is not I'm not the only one that this is, there's hundreds and hundreds of thousands of books that are there without copyright, um, appropriate copyright. But in terms of my proprietary environment, I will be considering what to do there. I need advice too, and I don't know how much I like to build that by myself. I would be thinking about maybe working with the World Affairs Council or with an entity in a university, which I've done before, or maybe the ABA will say, "Oh, that's a good idea." Who knows?
Okay, well, we'll look forward to what's to come. My guest has been Terri Morrison, the author of Kiss, Bow, and Shake Hands, and 9 other books, as well as a digital platform where you can learn about cultural issues and their impact in business negotiations and in life. So, Terry, really appreciate having you here. Thank you so much, and look forward to further conversations.
It was such fun. Thank you so much, Matt. You take care.